Welcome to our Let's Talk TriDelta podcast. I am Mindy Tucker. I am the interim CEO at TriDelta, and I have the pleasure of hosting today's episode with our wonderful guest, Mary Settle Pruitt from our Zeta chapter in Cincinnati. She is an independent filmmaker, a producer, a writer, a TriDelta. We're going to talk about all kinds of things today. I'm very excited for you to get to know her. She co-founded Never2late Productions with her husband, Steve. And she and Steve have spent the last 15 years creating Hollywood quality, powerful films that explore some important themes. And we're going to get into that. And I'm excited to talk about some of her topics that she's digging into. What's really impressive about Mary is she totally got into this later in life. She did not do any of this as her first passion in life. This was sort of came along later in life. So I'm kind of excited to hear more about that and how she got there. And about all the films and her creative work. So Mary, welcome to the podcast. We're so glad to have you.
Well, I am so glad to be here. Thank you very much. I appreciate your time and your energy to set this time aside for the interview.
Sure. So I want to start with you letting us know a little bit about you. Tell us about Mary, where you're from, how you ended up at college, what college you went to. You went to Cincinnati. We talked about that. What was that experience like? And then how you ended up in TriDelta.
Well, I tell you what, I grew up, okay, so first of all, I'll do a couple of things by the numbers. Okay, I'm 64 years old. I've been married for 42 years. I have two grown daughters. I'm a Mimi to four little grandbabies that I love. And somewhere along the line, we decided that we were going to make movies. So, but to go back to Cincinnati, that is lovely. I grew up at a time when it was not unusual to actually live in the same city from cradle to grave. In my case, from kindergarten to, senior year, I lived in the same house, went to the same school district, had all the same friends.
Yeah.
So when I went to college, it was just like a huge culture shock because I was just alone. Most of my friends had gone, to residential schools or out of state or whatever. And it was really hard to start over and find your place in the midst of 38,000 strangers. So, and I don't come from a Greek background, but fortunately, one of my friends' mothers, she had pledged and she encouraged me to do so. And so that's really, how I started that because I didn't live in the dorms. I was a commuter.
Okay.
And commuters usually kind of get left on the fringes because they just come to school, they go to class, they turn around, they go back home. So
yeah. So someone encouraged you to do it. And then how did you end up in TriDelta?
Well, I tell you what, I mean, you know how the pledge scene is, you know how you're going through to all the parties and everything. And I like to say that they chose me, which is lovely. Yeah. And the women, I would probably call them girls now because I'm so much older. But the women, they were just so endearing and they were very natural. And that wasn't always the case. Not in every single house did I feel as if everyone was being genuine. But I really got the impression there was such a diversity in personalities and experiences that I thought they're really kind of open, to whoever I am. And that was a very safe feeling.
I love that. I love that. Got your own bring you story. We talk about bring you in terms of TriDelta.
Absolutely.
Bring yourself.
And for commuters, it amazes me that most people, when they think of Greek schools that emphasize the Greek system, they always think of, these places where everyone, goes away to school. They don't really think of the more metro areas. But really, for commuters, the Greek system is invaluable. It's a place to have a home base, to get to know people, to go in between classes, to be asked about your day, and they've had common experiences. So that's really, I would recommend any commuter to do it.
I love that. I love that. It's a different perspective on it that you don't hear very often. And it's sort of outside the norm. So I love that you shared that. So let's talk about this filmmaking thing. It was something that came along later in life. What was it like transitioning from raising your kids and then diving into this whole new career in filmmaking?
Well, I tell you what, filmmaking in retrospect, when I think about it, when people say, what was it like to just begin, because we went from zero to feature. Steve and I did not graduate with a film degree. We did not go to film school. We did not start with shorts or commercials or anything like
Right
that.
in.
We just decided, okay, zero to feature. And we'd never written, we never produced, none of that. And we also had assembled a first-time cast and crew, with the exception of our director of photography, who was a film school grad. This was his first feature. So
the whole team was new to it.
oh my gosh. Oh my God. Now, I will say our actors were very, I mean, they'd done quite a bit of stage. So it's not like they'd never acted. And that answers another question later about actors. But so when we started and when people ask me that, I go, okay, so yeah, it was exciting. Okay. But it was scary and it was anxiety producing and it was exhausting. And I started thinking about it and I go, kind of like parenthood. I mean, really.
Right? We didn't know what we were doing when the kids came along either, right?
Yeah, I mean, who knew? Who knew? Anytime you take on, a truly novel, complex task with absolutely no training whatsoever, it's going to be tough. It's going to be tough. And I even when we were in the midst of it, I thought to myself when we first started actually filming. Okay, so you do pre-production, you write your script, you cast, you do all your pre-production, and then you actually getting ready to actually film. And everybody's assembled. I mean, you've got your cast, you've got your crew, you've got your investors, you've got your insurance company all paid up, and you've got all this stuff. And you have to go for it. And it's kind of like labor, I thought, in the middle of it. I said, because you can't hand it off.
There's no backing out now, right?
Yeah, you can't change your mind and it just won't stop.
Right.
It's just going to keep going. And I just remember thinking, okay, this is like a 3-month labor. So it was really hard. People think of filmmaking as being really like, somehow glorious and all this.
You see all the glamour around it, the hard work. Yeah, you don't see all the hard work.
Yeah, it's a lot of hard work.
So you jumped into this with your husband and you guys do this together. How is it being in business with him and dividing tasks? And how do you make that work?
Okay, well, just to give you first of all, the first film was absolutely impossible to work with my husband. Anyone who's never worked with a spouse and then they actually work with them. And I don't mean raising children together. You do that and you figure it out, but going business with somebody.
Yeah.
We wrote the first one side by side, and that was disastrous. I had no idea how personal somebody's creative ideas really were until somebody rejected mine. Right. And I found that it wasn't just the idea he was rejecting. I mean, I felt personally like I was being rejected. Okay.
Right.
So that was really terrible. So the next film that we did, we devised a system. We said, we can't do that again. That's just bad news. So I would be on the second floor of our house. He would be in the basement. He usually would give me first crack at a scene and I would write it and then I'd email it to him. And then he would, download and then he'd make changes and he'd email it back to me. And then the first floor was neutral Switzerland, where we never discussed movies. We just came down and we did things like ate dinner together and stuff like that. And I really found that just taking some of the physical proximity, the fact that I wasn't right there looking at him, being able to hear him say, oh, that I can't even believe you wrote that. Taking that out and just looking at things that are crossed out or highlighted or comments, so much easier, so much easier. Now we still have moments, but
and is the first floor still neutral ground?
It is. But the other thing that I found really challenging is because we do it together, we write it together, we do pre-production together. Okay, so I have an equal say in it, right? Because we're equals. But yet you can only have one director. And that took a little bit of adjusting too. And it was also a little hard because a lot of times when you're really stressed on set, you just have to bark out orders. And having your husband bark out orders at you in public in front of all these other people, that's, So I devised a system, and that's that for every film, I create a bit of an alter ego. And so when I go on set, I am no longer Mary the wife.
Okay.
I am Marta, the, first AC, or Maria, or Marla, and then when I get really disgusted by the end of the film, I quit.
But you're
And
not, but you're not Mary, so it doesn't matter.
yeah, but it's the sort of thing, it's like, and
Uh,
it's not obviously, I'm not delusional, but
right.
it helps to put it in perspective. Like, he's not really barking at me, his wife. I'm just an employee. I'm another person that,
Right.
we really need to get this
Right.
done. So, and that's been helpful.
Yeah. Interesting. Okay. Well, those are good tips, I guess. Marta, I'm going to call you Marta from now on.
Okay.
So I want to dig in. We've now I'm sure our listeners are like, okay, what are all these films about now? We've been
Oh,
talking
yeah.
about films. So
Mhm.
you look at real life challenges, and that's kind of your inspiration and the motivation behind your films. What brought you there? How did that all come about? How did you sort of land on, I want to do these kinds of films?
Okay. And that's an excellent question, because everybody goes into filmmaking for different reasons, and a lot of people, they want to do independent film because they want fame and fortune. And we did not do that. I realized that unless you change the world, your fame is about 3 generations before obscurity. Plus, I find fame a bit overrated. However, that being said, to be well known usually unlocks some resources that you might not have if you are totally obscure. So I can see value in getting your name out there and that sort of thing. Fortune is going to come by by films that exploit, and that is, in other words, you need a lot of gratuitous violence or
Yeah.
sex or horror sells very big. And Steve has a day job. He's a university professor. This wasn't about, oh,
Right.
we've got to make a living because otherwise we won't eat. So we had the luxury of trying to decide, what do we want to, why do we want to do this? And that's why our motto is making movies to make a difference, because we want our movies, for when people go see them, that hopefully when they are finished with them, when they emerge from the theater or from their, basement, they can say, I'm glad I saw that. I'm glad I saw that. That was a really good film. And, hopefully, find some assistance with things that they may be dealing with.
Yeah. So let's talk about State of Grace
Okay.
film. Tell me about that film.
Okay, so State of Grace is a feature film, and it's about, it was inspired by the opioid epidemic. So it's about fentanyl, foster care, and a family of strangers. And you will see the subject of community as a recurring character in our films. And I love the fact that Tridelt is very much that community. And it's interesting that at this time in my life that I should be writing about something that I was so desperately seeking for, as an 18-year-old.
Yeah.
It never goes away. We always need that. So we really wanted to take a young woman who is addicted to fentanyl. That's her character. She has a 1-year-old daughter who she loses to state custody. And it's about a family of strangers that come together, and through their own issues that they're dealing with, their own traumas, their own losses, they basically, walk beside her and hopefully, resolve or leave her in a better place than she was when she started. And the daughter as well.
Right. So it's her story.
It,
It's
it
interesting. It's her story, but it's really about the coming together of people around her. That's what you said. Community becomes a character in the story.
Absolutely. But it's also, interestingly enough, as we research this, okay, so, you know, fortunately or unfortunately, however you want to look at it, I mean, we don't have that personal experience, to draw upon. So Steve did something really unique, and I'm not sure I would have, and he did, and it was lovely. We were going to have a scene where we needed pictures of people that were going to represent people in treatment that did not make it. Okay, we were going to use actor headshots, and Steve said, "This movie is about a real topic, and these are real people, and real families are being left behind." So he got online and he started looking at obituaries where the family members actually mentioned that their loved one died of an opioid overdose.
Uh-huh.
And some of those he reached out and he contacted and he asked if they would share their story with him. And I have to tell you, I was floored. I mean, I thought I had, I had my own preconceived notion of what an addict was, how they got involved with drugs and all that sort of thing.
Right.
And absolutely none of these
Or
stories
that.
fit
Yeah.
that. I just looked at it as, oh, they started with a gateway drug, they were just experimenting, they wanted a good time. The vast number of them were prescribed opioids
About
as
to
a
say.
result of a sports injury. If somebody had slipped on ice and fallen down the stairs, so they were, severely, significantly, car accidents.
Yeah.
And this was at a time when opioids were being, you know, prescribed hand
Yeah.
over fist.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden people get, it gets publicized that maybe this isn't such a great idea. They get cut off and there they are. I mean, just normal, everyday, you know, people just trying to live life. And now they're actually controlled by this substance.
Yeah.
And so, which is one reason why our character actually comes to her fentanyl addiction through pain. So we wanted to give a truer.
Yeah.
Um,
I think that's very common. I think
yeah,
you'll find
I was
people relating
surprised.
to that. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
You'll find people relating to that, I think. Um, so it sounds like, I mean, obviously the community connection, you found that in Tri Delta and you've brought that to bear in the film.
absolutely.
Are there other ways that you find yourself sort of thinking about Tri Delta as you go down the process of making film?
Well, women helping women. I mean, if you look at any of our films, I mean, it is a recurring theme, and it's really kind of interesting because Steve a lot of times will come up with the initial idea. He goes, "Oh, I think it'd be really interesting to do a film about this," and then before you know it, as we're fleshing out the outline, uh, it's like 75% of our characters are female.
Yeah.
And it's the lead character is usually a female who's really, working her way through, some life circumstance or bad decision or whatever the case may be. And then we have this women helping women, which I think some filmmakers may do that because there's a big emphasis on women in film, but we have never done that. Ours is not engineered. It just comes naturally that we are interested in these characters and we're interested in their life experiences.
Yeah.
And I think that's really Tri-Delt. Okay, so one of the things I remember is as a pledge, learning so many things about so many different people. I mean, we had people from the country, we had people from the suburbia, we had people that lived in apartments, and they would share, they'd be talking about something and I go, well, what is that? And they'd have to explain it to me, like I said, what's a gelding, because,
Yeah.
and that was, yeah, I didn't know what a gelding was. And they said, well, that's a stallion that's been castrated. And I said, oh, sort of like a eunuch. And they go, well, what's a eunuch? So it was lovely that we could interconnect, but
Learn
we
from
were
each other's different
totally,
experiences. Yeah.
totally different
Yeah.
different you know corners of the world there.
Yeah, I think that's one of the beautiful things about the organization, not only as a collegiate, but even as an alumni, you are meeting and running into people from all over with different backgrounds and different skills and different strengths. And it comes together in such a beautiful way inside
Yeah,
this neighborhood. So that's fun.
no,
So
and yeah, go ahead.
No, you have a couple of projects in the works. So
Mhm.
why don't you tell us what you're working
Well,
on?
yeah, it's tough because we can only make them as quickly as we have time to make them and as we have money to do so.
Sure.
We were going to be working on one that was working titled Dust, and that was very much about redeeming regret,
Mm.
which I think as we get older, we can truly appreciate. It's basically taking your mistakes and bringing something beautiful out of it for the benefit of somebody else, somebody else. So now that is a very large film. And we recently lost one of our investors. He passed away.
Oh,
So uh, until we find another investor to that, who can invest to that degree, we decided that our next film would be a smaller one, smaller in scope. And so that one is called working title. These are just working titles. It's
that's-
called A Private Pain. And it's about a mother's loss, a child's life, and the love that tries to make sense of it all.
oh,
So it is, we are dealing with grief, but we're also dealing with recovery. And it's, so now you know why that fortune wasn't the thing that we were making movies for, because these movies are not necessarily the ones that everyone says, oh, I want to watch this Friday night. But yet everyone that watches our movies has always said, I am so glad I saw that film.
yeah.
And I want to show that to this person or that person. And that is just
There's
awesome.
a there's a power to taking on some of these difficult topics. And while it might not be what you choose on a Friday night, if you're, dinner and a movie, um, I think movies impact us in so many ways, no matter what kind of movie it is, it impacts us. And to use this vehicle to
Mhm.
impact people and to share stories and to move people, I think is so powerful. And it's got to be so rewarding for you also.
Well, it is, especially when somebody, we had so many people, especially with State of Grace. Um, During our film festivals or when we were showing in theaters, we would have people come up and say, I am a recovering addict. Thank you for representing me so well. I mean, that just feels lovely because then you got it right. And that's really what you want to do. Um, what you said about films impacting the way you look at life, you couldn't be more correct on that. In fact, there's one of the film festivals had a saying that said, what you watch, basically determines how you see the world.
Yes.
And
Yes.
film is unlike stage, unlike any other medium, in that you actually become a part of the story. You emotionally enter into it if the film's done well, and you forget that you're in a seat sitting next to complete strangers
That you're not part
in
of it.
a different bill, and you're there, and that's why it can be so powerful, because when you leave, you have lived what your character has lived,
Yeah.
and that's a good thing.
I often say after watching like a powerful documentary or something is I can't go into the world not knowing what I know now. Like
That is well
my
done.
whole world is impacted. My perspective has changed. My knowledge has changed. Like I know more than I did beforehand, and now I can't unknow that. And my whole outlook on the world is now based on knowing what I know.
That is excellent. I'd never thought of it that way, but you are 100% correct.
Yeah. Yeah. So
I can't unknow it.
yeah, I can't.
I will say though, that goes for the converse. If you see something that's truly despicable, it is really hard to not remember that. So
Yeah.
we try very hard.
But side
Um,
too. Yeah.
yeah, you just to keep that sensibility in mind, not to we're not trying to traumatize people, but our films will have a dark side. And interestingly enough, one of the reviewers pointed out, and I never really thought about this, but our films do not have any villains.
Oh, interesting.
We don't have any bad guys. Our villains, if you will, are life circumstances or human frailty, bad
Yeah.
decisions that you make or things that just come your way.
Yeah. Well, you know, what's interesting as I think about this is people used to always talk about how the Disney movies always start with like some horrible thing, like Frozen, their parents die.
Yes, yes.
Bambi, his mom died. Like there's always some trauma or really difficult thing, even in a beautifully happy Disney movie. So um, I think
And
that's what reels us in, and that's what makes it powerful for us and meaningful to us, is because that's what happens in real life.
mhm. And that's so true. And that is referred to as the inciting incident. And that usually comes in the first act. And basically you have normal life. This is what Bambi does. He runs around and with Thumper and and then all of a sudden
Yep.
this happens and the world has changed.
Yeah.
And now the question is, what in the world is he going to do with that? And you're right. That's how we live life. I like to say that the the theory of inertia, where we do not change our state unless impacted by an unbalanced force, is sort of like what happens in human behavior. We do not change unless we are made to change. And that unbalanced force for us is usually lived experience. Something traumatic happens, and then you're changed.
Yeah. Yeah. But growth comes out of that,
Absolutely.
right?
Well, one would like to think so. There are people that will push it down and be in denial, but that is not.
Yeah. Growth can come, I guess, from
Thank
that.
you. There you go.
Yeah. Well, what's next for you? Are you going to keep doing this? This is a late in life career. Are you at a point where you're done? You're getting done? You have new projects coming, so I'm thinking the answer is no to this. But
Yeah, we are in very good health. As long as we are able to find investors, and also we have, so you're talking about women helping women. We have there's a 501c3 who's basically their mission statement is to help women filmmakers. So our investors, sometimes we have investors, sometimes we have people that want to get a charitable contribution deduction, and they can do that by giving
by giving to that.
and then they grant us. We qualify for their grants because we are predominantly stories about women and women's issues. So that's really nice.
Yeah, I love that. Well, I think everybody's going to want to find the films, find you, understand how they can connect. Like this is a great, I think, for people that are out there in this industry, if there's somebody that wanted to reach out and talk films with you, would you be open to that? And
Oh, always.
how,
In fact, I would love to invite any of my sisters out there that are interested in film to contact me,
okay.
because something else that Tridelt does besides just be there for the social and camaraderie and that sort of thing is it's a network, and it's a
Yes.
lovely network, and it's a network that never ends.
Yes.
So as long as you're still drawing breath, there are sisters out there
Yeah.
that are going to love you unconditionally, and that's beautiful. And so I would encourage. So I don't know if you have all my contact information that you can add to this, but I have a simple email that is
Okay.
Mary Pruitt. So you think of Mary, quite contrary, but I'm not. It's just that Mary Pruitt was already taken. So Mary Pruitt at yahoo.com.
Okay. All right.
And you
Well, we'll
just
have
reach
Lisa, we'll have her put that in the notes for the episode so people can find it. How do they find your films? How do people watch your films?
Amazon. Okay,
Oh,
so
okay.
go to Amazon, and unfortunately, State of Grace, there's more than one. We are not the one with Sean Penn. So, just
Okay.
so you know that. We have a young woman on the marquee on the poster. So go to Amazon. It's not Prime, it's the Video Direct. So you have to pay like $3.99 or something.
Okay.
But we have a whole bunch of movies there, and I'll give those to you guys. And when you like it, rate it, give us stars, and then tell other people about it. Like, do your social media thing, because
I love,
that's really how we get to be known.
I love it. Well, I can't thank you enough for coming on today and sharing your story and letting us talk about the films and the work that you're doing. We're so proud to have you in our sisterhood. And I just think you're such a great example of you can do anything at any time in life you decide you want to do it.
Well, thank you very much for all the time that you've given on this. And I really appreciate it and look forward to connecting with some of my sisters.
Well, I know they're going to be excited to connect with you. And thanks all of you for listening today. I hope you'll get in touch with Mary if you're interested, and definitely check out her films. Lots to see there. And I think some really powerful stories that I can't wait to dig into and learn more about. Lots going on in Tri Delta. It's fall. Recruitment is underway. There's so much going on in our chapters. If you have ever thought about volunteering for Tri Delta, I hope you will give a moment and do that. You can go to volunteer@trideltaeo.org and email us and let us know, or you can go to the website and actually click the volunteer button and sign up to be a volunteer. But we are only as good as those supporting our collegiate chapters and our alumni chapters out there. And so I encourage anyone who's ever thought about being a volunteer in Tri Delta to give it a shot and let us know and let us bring you in. We hope you'll like, subscribe, and rate our podcast. We have 3 stars in our crescent, but we love those 5-star ratings. Thanks everybody for joining us today. Until next time, Delta love.